Welcome to the Lead and Deliver podcast. We are glad you are here. Let's get into planning. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, super excited for this podcast. This is going to be our first episode with a guest on Lead and Deliver, and he is one of my favorite people. Kent Chevalier is the chaplain of the Pittsburgh Steelers through Athletes in Action, a ministry of the Campus Crusades for Christ. For 22 years before that, he served as a pastor in the local church context. And then in 2019, he made a dramatic leap of faith to become a full-time missionary and chaplain to one of the NFL's most storied franchises. He is a best-selling author of Do It Afraid, Unleashing the Courage to Jump into Your God-Given Purpose, released in March 2026, and is a sought-after speaker on faith-driven decision-making, encourage marriage and leadership culture. So this conversation explores the intersection of faith, calling, and organizational culture through the lens of Kent's vocational pivot and his work discipling and mentoring athletes and coaches and front office staff in a high-stakes professional sports environment, and his framework around leap of faith and his commitment to creating healthy relational culture directly connects with kingdom planning. So we are so blessed and excited to have Kent on today. Make sure you take a listen. Let's jump right into it. Okay, welcome to Kingdom Planning and Lead and Deliver podcast, everyone. Today is our first episode, and we are so excited to present Kent Chevalier. He is the chaplain of the Pittsburgh Steelers through Athletes in Action, a ministry of Crew, which is the Crusade for Christ, I believe, right?
That's right. Campus Crusade for Christ, formerly known as. It's great to be with you, Josh. Man, this is like so fun.
Yeah,
Appreciate the invitation, brother.
absolutely. Yeah, this is great. This is great. Kent and I have an extensive past. I was serving on the worship team at Wexford campus of Northway Christian Community for several years while he was the pastor. So for over 22 years before he was the chaplain, he served as a pastor in local churches around the country. You were up in Detroit for a while,
That's right.
and then you came back to Pittsburgh. You're the best-selling author of the book Do It Afraid, which is on your
Let's
shirt.
go. Let's go. Love it,
Awesome.
man.
Awesome. I love that it was a best-selling book before it even came out.
Yeah.
So love that. Which we're going to talk about that today as well. And you're also a sought-after speaker on faith-driven decision-making, courage, marriage, and leadership culture, which, knowing you and Erica, I mean, it's not a surprise that you're sought after for marriage. But let's kind of talk about that. The first question I have for you, like, just go into your story. What brought you here? Like, how did you get to this point in your life where you're the chaplain for the Steelers?
Yeah, man. So it's a wild story, and that's essentially the pinnacle of the book that you're talking about, Do It Afraid. And so 10 years of student ministry. I was then 13 years in adult ministry. And so 23 years in the local church context, serving as pastor. And then something really started to shift inside of me about year 20 in that
Hmm.
process. And it's not like my role changed at all. It's just that something inside of me began to change. I just knew God was up to something. And I've been saying essentially, like, I knew in my knower. Like, you just know, like, God's up to something in your life. And I had made some, poor leadership decisions in the past where I jumped into things way too early. So this time around, Josh, I learned my lesson, and I was going to wait for God's
Right.
timing.
Yeah.
Because you know the name Dave Buring. He's a mentor of mine, and he taught me the principle that God's timing is just as important as his direction. And so I
Right.
was going to make sure that this time around, I was not going to jump into anything. I wasn't going to initiate anything, that I wanted the Lord to be clear to bring, this opportunity, whatever that was. And it was about 2 years of waiting, knowing that I was frustrated on the inside, something's coming, that
Mhm.
the San Francisco 49ers, they traded their tight end to the Pittsburgh Steelers. His name's Vance McDonald. And he
Mhm.
began to attend the church where I was pastor, that we met at, you and I. And
Mhm.
so Vance, after one of the services, he came up and he said, "Hey, brand new to this city," and of course I knew who he was because I'm a big Steelers fan. I've always been a Steelers fan, so I knew that he
Right.
had been traded. And when I saw him at the church, I was like, "Okay, let's go." And
Mhm.
so he and I grabbed a cup of coffee. Man, it was cool conversation. Got to know him in that off season, and that's where he told me that the Steelers didn't have a chaplain at the time. And I don't know how to explain it other than this. When he said that, something just jumped in my knower. Like, huh, I wonder if this is the new thing that God is wanting to do in my life. I started to get excited about the potential of that. I didn't know anything about the role, because, like, when I think of a chaplain, when I hear that title, I think of like hospital chaplain. I think
Right.
of like a military chaplain. Those positions make a lot of sense. So I was like, what does an NFL chaplain do? And I didn't have a category for that. But as I got to know Vance, he would tell me about that position and how they didn't have a chaplain at the time. And so he and I got to know each other. He kept coming to Northway and we were grabbing coffees. And then all of a sudden he disappeared because I didn't realize, like, oh man, I mean, I knew this, but I didn't like relationally connect the dots that these guys can't ever attend church on the weekends,
Right.
because they're working on the
Mhm.
weekends. And so I got to like experience a football season, the Steelers football season, through a brand new lens and seeing Vance as just this guy. He's a new
Mhm.
dad, he's a new husband. And they're just trying to figure out how to navigate a new city, a new church. Everything is new. And so I'm
Right.
just thinking about him as a person. And God
Mhm.
started drawing my heart towards, man, these guys in professional athletics, they're just regular guys. Long story
Mhm.
short, that following off season, Coach Tomlin got really serious about looking for a chaplain, like an official search process. And he asked Vance and a couple other guys on the team, "Hey, do you know of anybody?" So Vance asked me, "Hey, do you know of anybody?" And I was like, "Well, bro, like, do you think I could do something like that?" And
Yeah.
his immediate response was, "Well, I didn't think you'd be interested in doing that because you're pastor of Northway. Like, why would you want to, make that jump?" And I told him, like, man, God's been messing with me, about my role and about what I'm doing, and I wonder if this is the new thing that he wants to do. So he introduced me to Coach Tomlin, and there's this big part of the story where I didn't know the entire time that the position was not hired by the Steelers. Like, I just
Mhm.
didn't know I didn't know how any of this worked. And so when Coach Tomlin officially offered me the position, he said, "I'd like for you to join the staff of Athletes in Action." And I was like, "What?" Because I knew that everybody on Athletes in Action had to
Mhm.
raise 100% of their salary, 100% of their budget, 100% of their benefits. And as soon as he said that, man, I was like, I don't think this would be a wise move because I had three teenage daughters at the time. I'm staring
Mhm.
college, tuition in the face. I'm staring, three weddings in the future I have to financially prepare for. So I was like, I don't think this would be a good idea, for me to jump into where I'm raising my salary, Erica's salary as well. Like, wow, I don't know if this would be smart, but long story short, and people can read the book, God convinced us. It was very clear that we were to do this. And if we didn't do it, we would in fact be disobeying God. So
Right.
we didn't know how it was going to work, man, how we were going to raise all this money, how we were going to do this. But God made it clear we were supposed to do it. So we decided, okay, even though we're afraid, we're going to do it afraid. And man, it's been 7 years now of still like, okay, God, we're trusting you for everything. And it's exciting,
Hmm.
but it's also, wow, I still
Terrifying.
can't believe we're raising all this money to do this, essentially a volunteer position. And our supporters have been amazing to allow us to be able to do this. So that's a little bit of our story of how both Erica and I got into being chaplains to the Steelers.
Yeah. Going off of that, like, what did Erica think, and how did the church community respond? Not Northway in particular, but like this. I know that you're friends with a lot of the pastors in the Pittsburgh community.
Yeah.
And I know that there was probably a lot of competition to get that chaplain role. Um, because I mean, Steelers are huge in Pittsburgh. You can't go like 5 minutes without someone bringing up the Steelers in conversation.
That's
You
right.
can't go down the street without seeing every, storefront with Steelers merchandise or terrible towel in the window. Like, so what was like the response with Erica and the church community?
Yeah, when I took this whole, when Coach T offered me the position and he said it's through athletes in action, I started shutting it down right away. Like this would not be smart. When I
Hmm.
came home to Erica, but here's the thing: I gave Coach T my word that I would continue down the chaplain search process and meet
Hmm.
with the leadership of athletes in action because, quite frankly, Coach T is really hard to say no to. But
Yeah.
he's a very convincing man, and he's a great faith-filled man. And at the time of this recording, man, I'm gonna miss him so much. He's no longer the coach of the Steelers, and we're heading into a new season under a new coach, Coach McCarthy.
Hmm.
But at that time, when I went home to tell Erica, hey, this opportunity is not through the Steelers. We won't be on their payroll. This opportunity is going to be through athletes in action. And Coach T actually wants you and me to be a part of this because he laid out his vision for what the chaplain role was going to look like. And he wanted Bible studies for the coaches, Bible studies for the players. He wanted chapel for the players and coaches and staff, home and away. He wanted Erica, he wanted her to do the same for the coaches' wives and players' wives and girlfriends. And so it was this, Erica, I don't know if this would be smart. And she's going, yeah, because there's a piece of our story that's in the book about how we had taken a step of faith and it did not go well to plant a church. And we
Hmm.
raised our salary to do that. And it was really hard to raise our salary to plant a church. And so it was this fear that was there of, I don't think we should do that again because last time we did this, it went really bad. And so we were both shutting it down. But because I gave Coach T my word, Erica and I both, we agreed that, okay, well, then let's fast. Let's pray. Let's read the scriptures. Let's journal to see, okay, God, are you in this? Is this something that you're doing, even though we're afraid to step out like that? And so the other, like, during that time, like there was a lot of people who did not know that I was going through this process because there's a point in the book where I talk about keeping your circle of trust. When you're making a big decision like this, you've got to keep your circle of trust really tight. And you don't want to be telling a whole bunch of people that you're about to make a big move like this because, not that people have the intention of gossiping, but like if they
Right.
slip and they share it with so and so, you never know if they're going to share it with them and share it with them and share it with them. That might ruin the opportunity for you.
Right.
So there weren't a lot of Pittsburgh pastors who knew that I was going through this process. There was actually
Hmm.
one other guy that I know who was in the search process with me. He was another Pittsburgh pastor. He's a good friend of mine. And so we were both in this search process together. And it was this, man, what if we started dreaming together? Like, what if we did this together?
That's
You could
awesome.
do, it was like, so it wasn't competition. It was more like, could we do this together kind of thing? But then, it ended up that he couldn't,
Mhm.
pursue the opportunity. And so I was the only other one in the mix that I know of at that time. And
Right.
so Erica and I kept it really tight with our trusted circle. Like it was our, you actually know him, Pastor Scott Stevens. He
Yeah.
was my pastor for a long time and my boss at Northway. And so I brought him into the conversation. I told my best friend, we told our mentor couple. So Erica and I have always had a mentor couple ahead of us speaking into our marriage. So we told them. And then we confided in another, like they were the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Penguins chaplain, and we were really good friends with them, Brad and Beth Henderson. And we said, hey, we need some wisdom. What would you guys think about this? And that was our circle, super tight. Nobody really knew beyond them that we were going through it. And so I think that they were giving us wisdom, a lot of wisdom. They were pushing us to say essentially like, so wait a second, you're going to be serving in the NFL where you're raising all this money. Why don't you just ask the players and the coaches to support your ministry? And I said, yeah, but here's the thing. I've learned over the years now being in this role that the currency of the NFL is not money.
Mhm.
It's actually trust.
Right.
And so if I break the trust of these players and these coaches and those families that come with them by asking them for something, it's always like an ulterior motive. Like, can I really trust you with a handout from Erica and me to these players and coaches? So what we resolved very early on, if we're going to do this, we will never ask them for a thing because we want their trust that
Right.
we're not another handout to you. In fact, we want your handout to be out to us so that we can serve you in any way, and we don't want anything to mess with that. So there was a lot of wisdom from our tight trusted circle of wise counsel.
That's awesome. It just kind of points to the fact that, like, whenever you make these big decisions and get into these seasons, that the Lord has set you up in such a way that He makes it so that the decision at least is at least a little bit easier
Yeah,
because it's like, oh, I can see through my life how you've done X, Y, Z, and it's like all lining up to point to this like perfect situation.
yeah.
Um, so your book is titled Do It Afraid. I want to talk for a minute. Like, what to you does that mean to step into God's purpose when you're terrified? And how is that different from recklessness?
Yeah. So when I search the scriptures, Josh, there are so many times where in the scriptures, either it's Jesus himself, God, it's an angel, and what they're saying to these people that God has called, the first thing that they say is, "Don't be afraid."
Right.
And the reason is because they're afraid of what they were just called to do, or because of what they were experiencing, and trying to calm that fear inside of them.
Mhm.
So when I think about Mary, for instance, she received this call from God to be the earthly mother of Jesus. She was going to birth the Son of God, and it says that she was freaking out, like, how is this going to be? I've got questions. But that didn't mean that she didn't have faith that God, when she says, okay, Lord, so let it be,
Mhm.
and it was this combination of fear and faith, like, I'm going to have my faith over my fear, but that doesn't mean that fear doesn't exist. When I even think
Right.
about, the person of Jesus, like you think about that Garden of Gethsemane moment where he asks God, can you take this cup of wrath from me? Essentially saying, like, man, I'm so anxious. I don't know if I want to go through with this. And having those moments of depression and anxiety. But at the end of the day, he said, not my will, but yours be done. So he had faith that God knew what he was doing. But man, he was like, I don't want to go through the cup of wrath. Is there any other way that we could do this? right? And
Right.
you look consistently over the narrative of the scriptures. When God calls somebody, there's this natural fear, but then they hand that fear to a supernatural God, and they take a step in the face of fear. And there's this line in the scriptures that perfect love casts out fear. and
Right.
and essentially, because people have challenged me on the concept of do it afraid, that we as Christians, that we shouldn't have fear. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, hold on 1 second. It's just a matter that I'm going to trade my fear. I'm going to place my natural fear into the hands of a supernatural God who's going to give me the courage to take a step in the face of what it is that I'm fearing. And that's
Right.
called faith. Erica has this cool little sign that it says faith, and then there's a line, and then it says fear. And so it's the faith over fear. And so if
Right.
you look at the title of my book and in the cover, the front cover, you'll see "do it" is actually over the word "afraid," because I
Mm.
wanted that concept to kind of play out in our psyche of do it means I have an active faith. I'm going to trust God in this, and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it even though I am over being afraid. So
Love
I'm gonna
that.
step in the face of fear. I'm gonna do it afraid because I trust God, but that doesn't mean that I'm not human. I have fear. I don't know how I'm gonna provide for my family. I don't know the NFL at all. Like I I watch it just like everybody else, but I don't know the insides of the NFL and the underbelly of the NFL business. So I'm going to embrace that fear of the unknown, and I'm going to jump into this God given purpose that He has given to me. So, like, I do it afraid is that concept. And we did our due diligence. You talked about what's the difference between a reckless decision and just jumping in without. We did our due diligence. There were 3 weeks of meetings where we got the details and really had a calculated risk assessment
Mm-hmm.
where we said, okay, here is how much money we have to raise. Here's what it is that we've got. And we listed out all of these things. Okay, God, you know these things that you're telling us to do. And with God on our side, man, we're going to trust that the end from the beginning, because we can only see the beginning of these problems, these issues, these big giants, so to speak, that we are facing to make this decision. But we know the God who slays giants. And so we trusted that, okay, even though I don't know how to raise this money, I don't even have a lot of time to raise this money. People are going to think I'm crazy for making this decision. Go down that list of all the illogical things, but there's a lot of times where faith is required to do illogical things because
Right.
God doesn't always give us the 5-year strategic plan. He gives you just enough light to take the first next right step. And
Right.
so that to me is what faith is. God illumines, a step. Okay, I'm going to trust you to take that step. Where's this path going, God? I'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
when you get there.
Right.
And then you take the next step. It's so that's that concept of, man. We were very. If you know my wife, she's a trained accountant.
Mm-hmm.
She's a business mind, so she is very detail oriented. And so she made sure, and I wanted to, but I'm just not wired that way.
Right.
I wanted to know the details of what we were getting into to make a really wise decision. And so, in fact, the second half of the book is our framework of how we actually approached this really big decision. And we've done that several times over our life, making big decisions, big moves, big ministry steps. And I finally put it into a framework that I write about in the second half of the book. So if people want to pick that up, man, they can learn that on their own.
Awesome. 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 Yes, and I do encourage anyone watching to please pick it up.
My wife and I have both read it. It's amazing, true story of, how God works in an everyday individual's life. That you don't have to be extraordinary, even though I think Kent is extraordinary. He works in the lives of everyday people, and everyday fears. And whenever we talk about fear and how it's biblical, I heard someone say it recently that the Bible is just a case, like a series of case studies on how God speaks to fear in an individual's life, which is just a belief in a false identity, and then gives them a new identity to walk through.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
whenever we talk about the fear, we just tear down that false identity and that lie that we're believing about ourselves and walk in that new identity that we are certain that the Lord has given us. And so um, it is 1000% biblical to be afraid of something. It's how
Right.
every Bible story starts. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, and
even
it's when we invite God into our
mhm,
fear. Like,
right,
okay, God, we are afraid. I'm gonna be honest. We are afraid to make this decision, but we invite you to be the Lord of our life. You're the leader. And so if you tell us to do this, we're going to step into our fear and we're going to invite you to be Lord over our fear.
right,
And when we did that, when we knew, that's when perfect love began to cast out the fear that we had, and it enlarged our faith in the God that we've been serving for all of these years together. And so
right,
with these little steps of starting to get going in this and making the massive leap to jump into the unknown, as we've done this, man, some of those things we have stories upon stories that we could tell of how God has provided for us, of things that He has done that has increased our faith, therefore giving us more courage to take on those challenges. And that's where perfect love begins to cast out that fear. It's an exchange but that still doesn't mean that I'm going as a dad, as a husband, I'm going, how are we going to pay for X, Y, and Z? How are we going to financially prepare? Okay, God, we're trusting you for everything because you are Jehovah Jireh. You are my provider. You are Erica's provider. You are Madeline, Kalea, Ainsley's. Go down that list. You're their provider as well. That
right,
doesn't mean that I don't work hard, but
right,
all I'm doing is I'm running your kingdom assignments that you are giving
right,
to me. And when I obey what you tell me to do, you promise that you will be the provider for my family. And so that's how we perfect love, casting out fear and living by faith in that way.
right. Awesome. Love it. So you and Erica developed the framework called LEAP for making significant life decisions. Can you briefly unpack that for us and what that looks like in practice for faith-based business owners or a ministry leader?
Yeah, yeah. So this is the second half of the book, man. So um, I realized when Erica and I made this big decision that people were asking us, like, how did you go about doing that? And we sought, wisdom from our mentors and our circle of trust. And I looked back over our life, man, and I was like, okay, we made this decision and we fell flat on our face. And I don't want to do that again. We made this decision, man. We hit the rocks on that one. I don't want to do that. So out came this framework, and it's more of a posture of prayer, if you will,
Hmm.
called leap before you jump. So before people get into this life altering decision, this thing that's going to cause the move, or man, I'm going to take on a different role, or man, what college am I going to go to? Man, you need to do the work of leaping before you jump into that. Because I think I was guilty and have been guilty of jumping into the first thing that came along and
Right,
not really doing the risk assessment, not doing hey, God, what do you think about this? It just felt like a good idea. So I'm going to jump into this. And so
Mhm.
I began to say, no, 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 we need to back up and we need to start establishing this LEAP framework. So LEAP is an acronym, LEAP, and then P turns into PRAY. And so the first, one of these is the fact that oftentimes we tell God, this is what I'm doing. God, I'm
Right.
going to do this. I'm going to establish this business. I'm going to start. I'm going to go. And God's going, well, wait a second. I never told you to do that.
Right.
And we say to God, okay, I'm going to do this. Will you bless it? And God's actually trying to kill it because he's
Right.
like, that's not my purpose for you. You're chasing money. You're chasing, whatever that is. For me, I was chasing a consistent paycheck. I was chasing comfort for my family. I didn't care about being rich. I just didn't want to be poor, if that makes any
Right.
sense. Um,
Absolutely.
and so where I got into trouble, like this is where I got my family into some trouble, is I jumped into some opportunities that I don't think were God's ever. It wasn't his timing or it wasn't his opportunity, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
the first in the framework of LEAP, LEAP, is we got to let God lead. We got to let him initiate. A lot of times we try to get out in front of God and we say, bless this. And he's like, that was never, my intention for your life. That was on you. And so my mentor taught me a really valuable lesson, that God's timing is just as important as his direction. But
Right.
then he said this, that Kent, what you initiate, you have to sustain in your own strength, in your own power, in your own provision, in your own ideas. And he named all the in your own. He said, but what God initiates, God permeates in his
Right.
strength, in his power, in his provision. And I was like, oh my goodness, I I've been seeing this a little bit backwards. And so that first concept of let God lead, is a challenge, I think, to all leaders, in business, in your family, you name it, whatever your vocation is. Are you asking God, do you want me to do this? Instead of, God, here's what I'm doing. Will you bless it? It's a completely different way to look at it. Instead of me initiating, it's me simply saying, okay, God, I want you to lead me, and I'm going to move when you tell me to move. And that doesn't mean that God doesn't give you passions, desires, giftings, talents, abilities that start to awaken, and you're looking for those opportunities. But I think where we get it wrong sometimes is that we lead, we drive, we tell God where we're going, and he's like, that's not how a relationship with me, the Almighty, it actually works.
Right.
And so I unpacked that in the book of what it means for us to daily let God lead. And then, man, there's so many things I could go through. Do you want
Yeah.
me to go through all of them?
No, leave it. Leave some for a surprise for the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay.
If anyone wants to know in detail what the rest of the LEAP, leap and praying before you jump, um, buy the book.
There it is.
Cliffhanger until you read it. But yeah, oftentimes, I'm walking through, decisions and stuff, and the Lord loves to have conversation with us and
Yeah.
loves to be in relation with us. And, I'll be doing something and the Lord's like, you really want to do it that way? And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know, do I? And he's like, that's an interesting way to do it, but
Yeah.
what about this way?
That's right.
It
That's
is
right.
like, it's like, yeah, we have to be conscious of letting the Lord speak to us, even when He's given us a path. We're so quick to be like, okay, this is the path that the Lord put me on. I need to do it this way, and then just leave the Lord out of the rest of the process. It's like,
That's right.
no, like every single moment of that process, you need to be looking for Him to course correct you and be, you know, because like we were talking about earlier, um, the verse for kingdom planning is the prudent person sees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and follows, suffers the consequences. But with the Lord too, like it also says in Proverbs that the man plans and the Lord establishes his ways, right? It's
That's
like
right.
the Lord establishes, but man has to plan. So man
That's
plans, and
right.
then we have to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit talking to us throughout the process, not just leave him out of the rest of the process because he gave us a word.
That's
So
right.
that's
And
beautiful.
I've learned that if we are in a process where we're launching something or we're starting something new, that
Hmm.
there are times that we try to just muster up the work ethic and man, I'm going to battle through this and I'm going to plan. Here's what I've just learned, Josh. Like, have we ever considered that the Lord actually wants to plan with us?
Yeah.
A lot of times in my leadership settings, I see guys writing on whiteboards all the time, and you're brainstorming, and man, I've got all these ideas. And
Hmm.
something that in my leadership context that I learned watching people is that we began to prayer board
Hmm.
instead of just brainstorm. We began to
Hmm.
prayer storm. Like, God, we
Hmm.
invite you into this planning. God, we want your direction and your timing on this kind of stuff. And so we commit this planning session to you. Would you give us your ideas that we can execute? Because if we try to do something that God's not in, that his breath is not on, we will be, as the scriptures say, we'll be kicking against the goads. We will be fighting an uphill battle. We will be trying to keep a fire going that God never started in the first place. And he's actually sending the rain to put out that
Hmm.
fire because he's so good that he is caring about your business or your family so much that he's saying, I need to send this rain because you're spending all kinds of energy over here and you're going to keep the
Hmm.
fire going. And he's going, no, I need you over here. That's
Right.
where I'm calling you. That's your purpose over here. And so to invite God into our planning, and I love this podcast. I love what you're doing called Kingdom Planning. It is Jesus wants to be central to all of your priorities. He doesn't just want to be a priority. It's his kingdom should be central to everything that we are planning. And so are we
Right.
taking into account, God, what do you actually want me to do? What are my marching orders? Yes, sir, I will do them. So that's what we've learned. And I feel like where I got myself into trouble is where I didn't invite God into my planning.
Right.
So yeah.
Awesome. Um, Going back to the family, you've said in the past leaders are only as good as their marriage. Um, for me, that hits true because whenever my wife and I got married, and we're going on 3 years this coming week, and I know like we're still in the newlywed phase and everything, and everyone's like, "Oh, you have so much to learn and stuff," but she's my whole world. She's my everything. And as we've gone through our marriage so far, we've gone through more in the past 3 years than most people go through their entire lives,
Mm,
as far as our marriage, as far as big decisions, health circumstances, different sort of crises, and the Lord's been
mm,
through it. And the Lord has been like amazing as only He can be through all of it, and so
yeah.
encouraging and so kind and gentle. And like that, we the scripture is full of these pictures. Just the more you read scripture and the more you go through marriage, you're like, oh, the Bible is really just a book showcasing what marriage is and what
Mm,
Jesus wants our relationship with Him to be, because we're in a marriage with Jesus. So, but it's a bold statement in the business world where we're not, where You know, we talk about, I talked about some of the products that I launched recently, and I said,
Mhm.
80% of people in a recent study done earlier this year said that they are satisfied with the content that they're receiving from the church, but 77% of business owners say that they need more substantive leadership guidance on how to incorporate their faith into business, right?
Mhm.
So even though they're content with the stuff they're getting in the church, they need what that looks like in practicality. So,
Yeah.
like, as bold of a statement as that is, leaders are only good as their marriage. Why do you believe that so strongly, and what have you witnessed that convinced you of that?
Yeah, because so in my belief system, right, it's in marriage, the two become one.
Hmm.
And so as that happens and as that takes shape, as we think we really know each other as we're getting married. And
Right.
you're just scratching the surface of getting to know one another as you make the commitment at the altar. And I've learned, Josh, that the gifts and the talents and the abilities that I have, that they have in many ways complemented the gifts and the talents and the abilities that Erica has. And together, she and I are a really powerful team. We call ourselves Team Chevalier, in fact. And
Right.
I believe that I need to, as an example to my wife, I need to show her my relationship with God is so important that her relationship with God is actually more important than our relationship together. And so
Right.
when I do that and I begin to champion and provide opportunities and space and things like this, hey, you and the Lord need to be good. And we work on our vertical marriage to God because that's what it
Hmm.
is. It's a covenant relationship with God. God, I'm never going to leave you, and you're never going to leave me, and we're going to get through anything together. And that's what the marriage is a picture of, is a covenant relationship that we have with God, that I have a covenant relationship. It's not a contract. A
Right.
contract, especially in my space, in the NFL, you and I can watch as contracts don't mean a thing anymore.
Right.
If in a contract we think that, man, if you hold up your end of the bargain, I'll hold up my end of the bargain. And that's what we think
Hmm.
that marriage is. And marriage is not that. It's a covenant relationship of I bring 100%, you bring 100%, and we're in this for the app till death do us part. And so in business, when I'm talking with leaders, here's what I will say is that your best leadership needs to go to your spouse. It's not to your business. And a lot of times in our culture, bro, we have that so backwards. It's so messed up. And then if you husband and wife, blessed to be able to have children, to be able to add all of those quivers in your arrow, or arrows in your quiver. There we go. Um, to be able to do that, your best leadership needs to go to your kids as well.
Right.
First to your spouse, then to your kids, and then to your business. There's a book that I read where Randy Gravett, he put it this way: you can win at work, which many of us do. We put
Right.
our best leadership effort into our work. And then we justify that by saying, well, I'm providing for my family. That's
Right.
why I work so hard. That's why I'm gone these long hours and all this. And he says this: well, you can win at work and lose at home, and either way, you still lose.
Right.
And it was this like, oh my, it's a priority shift of saying that my best leadership needs to go to my wife, Erica. My
Hmm.
best leadership needs to then go to my three daughters. And then after all of that, my business, what I'm walking into on a date for a job, for a paycheck, that's what needs my attention. And I think we're only as good as how healthy our marriage is, because our marriages will impact how we lead. Because if you just had a fight the night before and you're not dealing with it, whatever, it will bleed into how your attitude your work ethic the following day. And I think that people can say, well, I can compartmentalize that. Not for long, you can't. You might be
Right.
able to do it for a week or two, but man, if you don't deal with and give your best leadership to your spouse, it's going to bleed over into, what's going on. In my current context right now, I see this all the time. Young men pouring themselves completely 100% into their business of football, and then they leave the leftovers for their relationships. And it never goes well, man. The NFL is brutal on relationships because these guys work such long hours. They go so hard for that season, and it's like you see that the divorce rate in professional sports is much higher than the typical divorce rate. And so, man, it's just I believe that firmly. You're only as good in leadership as your marriage is healthy. And so, do you think that that's true? Do you see that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in the business context for me, the more time I spend with my wife and with our dog and like just spending time, it doesn't even have to be like, you know, a lot of people think, well, I can't afford to go on dates all the time. Dates can be free. Like it's not like it's about spending time together. So think about something that you can do together, even
That's
if
right.
it's just sitting on the couch in each other's company.
Yep.
Um, and like the more time I spend with my wife, the more creative I find myself to be when it comes to business or implementing business solutions. I think
Hmm.
of things that I may not have thought of before. Our conversation sparks an interest, and I'm like, oh, there's something there. Let me pursue that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And like kingdom planning is my wife and I, our business, right? It's our business. But on top of that, it's the Lord's business, right? The
Hmm.
Lord gave me the idea for it. So it's his business. And he told me he's going to work through it. So it's not mine. It's not my wife's. It's not ours in totality. It's the Lord's. But after that, after we give it to the Lord's, it's we run it together. We're both
Yeah.
stewards of it. She
That's
has
right.
an equal say in everything that goes on with kingdom planning, and she has an equal voice when it comes to decisions being made. And I
Yeah.
think that whenever, because whenever we get married, our lives are not our own anymore. Just like whenever Jesus died on the cross, our life doesn't become it's not our own anymore either, right?
That's right.
Because the Lord paid for it. So whenever we lay down our lives for our wives, as we're called to do in Scripture, our life is no longer our own. It's, Paul explicitly states that our bodies are our wives, and it's
Yeah.
not just in a physical context. It's like your entire life is your wife's. So if you
That's
make
right.
any decision apart from your wife, then you're not living in that oneness that the Lord is calling us to. And so
That's right.
whenever you keep uh, breeding that atmosphere of healthy marriage and healthy relationship with your spouse, I think it just increases your capacity to run a successful business and you become your business becomes more efficient because you're not always
It's good.
wondering and always striving because you don't have to prove anything to the most important person in your life.
That's right.
I think all
Yeah.
the
I love what you're
striving and
saying.
every yeah, I think all that striving and everything comes directly from trying to prove yourself to someone. And whenever you realize that nothing you can do in your wife or your spouse, if you're a woman, if you're a husband, if you're talking about your husband, that they won't love you any less because of you launching a new product or not launching a new product. They love you and married you for who you are whenever they
Hmm.
met you. And
Yeah.
you're growing as a person and growing
Yeah.
more as a person. And so, yeah, I think that resonates 100%.
Yeah, because I think Josh, the principle that we're both talking about is that the Lord blesses unity in a
Hmm.
marriage. The Lord, you can expand that out. The Lord blesses unity within a church. The Lord blesses unity, just, period. And so when we're making decisions that are going to impact families and futures, I can't just do whatever the heck that I want and then say, this is what we're doing, get on board. And some leaders lead like that. When you're married, bro, you have to make that decision in unity with your spouse. Because here's where the enemy of our souls, if that decision, like in my past, there's a couple times, man, where the decisions that we made, they fell flat on our face.
Right.
Well, if I were to make that decision all on my own, never consulting Erica and just doing it, this is where the enemy can have a foothold and say, see, he doesn't value you. He doesn't value your opinion. He doesn't care about you. And the whisper of the enemy into her ear, or vice versa, that it gives the enemy a foothold that
Right.
can lead to still kill and destroy your marriage. And we've often seen that where guys can have a successful business, but man, their marriage is falling apart. And that doesn't honor the Lord. That doesn't honor your spouse, even though you're extremely successful in your business. The question is, are you really successful in leadership if your marriage is falling apart? And so, we submit that, unity is it breeds blessing from God and your spouse. So, man, when we're making decisions like this, we have to be unified.
Yeah. And we have to, as husbands, like, we're the priests of the home, right? And if we even sense that, even though we are seeking for that unity and their decisions on their viewpoints on everything, if we even think that there's a whisper of that talk from the serpent into our ear, we have to
Yeah,
catch that and kill it immediately and be like, no, like there have been times where I make decisions and my wife doesn't feel like her viewpoint was totally heard, and I have to, like, just as aggressively as that serpent, go back to that serpent and be like, hey, like, no, like, you do not belong here. You do. My
hmm,
wife's decision is everything to me. And
yeah,
so we have to just affirm that and aggressively affirm that as well. So love that.
it's good. Yeah,
Um, I'm going to go through three more questions for you real quick. Well, not real quick. Take as long as you want. Number your role as chaplain means discipling and walking alongside of athletes, coaches, and staff in a very, as you touched on, secular professional environment. How do you approach the spiritual leadership in a place where faith isn't, formally part of the organizational structure? And I'm sure that's why they partner with Athletes in Action instead of just paying it from the Steelers, right? Because everything nowadays is about inclusion and everything. And they don't want to necessarily stake, we're a Christian organization, even though I would love that. But how how do you approach spiritual leadership in a space like that?
yeah. What I've learned, Josh, is that Erica and I are here simply to be alongsiders. And
Hmm.
whether that is a person who is interested in faith, whether they want to have those types of spiritual conversations, or there are a lot of people who don't want to have those types of conversations. And so we can serve them in different ways.
Right.
Things like that, Erica, what we love to do for the player development, department is, hey, we have a lot of trusted and vetted babysitters in the city
Hmm.
of Pittsburgh because of our church that man, they have all their clearances and all of those things. And so we know that there's young couples who come, a part of the team. And so if we can make that available, we've got trusted people who are good people. And so just a service like that we can provide, simply to come alongside anybody on the team and serve in that way. There are the services that we do provide that when we were, essentially brought on by Coach Tomlin, he wanted us to do certain things for the wives and for the players and for the wives and the coaches. And so we provide those things, but that doesn't necessarily mean everybody wants to participate in those things. So no problem. And I'm not
Hmm.
going to be that guy that is going to beat people over the head. That's never been my style of you have to come to, no, bro, it's
Yeah.
invitation. If you want
Right.
to be a part of this, and no problem if you don't want to be a part of it. And I've just learned by simply being around and available that people understand, and trust is earned over time, that even those who would disagree with my stance on faith, or different things like that come up, the locker room is a melting pot of a whole bunch of different opinions, and that
Right.
it's like a tip of the spear of our culture, in that way. And I don't think that our call, at me as a follower of Jesus, is to be shouting in the locker room. That
Right.
does, first of all, that's going to get me fired. But second of all, it's never going to, if I scream, people aren't going to hear. So I'm just simply going to invite and be a kind guy and help out where I'm asked to help out. And I'm going to stay out where I'm asked to stay out, because people need to see me respecting boundaries and not pushing boundaries. And I think the more that we show honor like that to those who are in authority, and man, I think that people notice those things. And I've just now watched over 7 seasons that the quiet, behind the scenes faithfulness, when you ask me a question, I'll answer that question, but I'm not going to preach at you, because you can only speak into a person's life to the level of which you have relationship with them. And I don't have relationship with everybody in that locker room. Until I'm invited into that kind of relationship by that particular person, I'm not going to speak my opinion to them. I'm
Right.
not going to yell it to them. I'm only going to speak when I'm asked to speak into somebody's life. So whether they're a faith person or not a faith person, I'm here to serve and come alongside.
Right. And I think that, it's so, I love how you said, just because I don't speak to the faithful person doesn't mean I can't serve them in a different capacity. I think that's
Absolutely.
exactly right. I think we lose sight of that too much. And we find like a lot of new Christians, and especially Christians who are in leadership, we get so passionate about the Lord that we think that that's our purpose in life, is to convert everyone on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what we're called to do is be examples of the faith, and not bash people over the head with the Bible, but serve them.
Yeah. And
Um,
there's
and
a lot of people in the locker room across the NFL, man, that have different faiths.
mhm,
And can we civilly have dialogue?
right,
And okay, man, we're going to agree to disagree on these things. And that doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It doesn't
right,
mean that we still can't hang out and shoot the breeze and that kind of stuff. But like, I think in our culture, what we've sort of learned in the last decade, especially with social media, is that we can't agree to disagree and still be friends. It's like we have to cancel each other immediately. And I'm just going, that's not the way, that I practice my faith in Christ. In fact, I think Jesus would want to hang out with them and have good conversations and ask them really good questions like, well, where did you learn that? Oftentimes we think like, hey man, these spiritual conversations, we've got to lead with. No, Jesus often led with questions and stories, and he told parables, and I just love having the conversation with anybody and everybody about,
right,
okay, maybe you grew up this way. And I'll ask even Christians this, like, dude, where did you hear that about God? Like, where are you
right,
basing that off of? And just having good conversations. I'm not there to bash people over the head.
right,
Simply there to serve and to simply, I think, ask good questions about, if people come to me and they're curious. Hey, bro, how did you hear about that? Why did you ask it that way? Is that how you grew up understanding, the scriptures or about God? So many fascinating conversations over 7 seasons now about who God is, what we are supposed to do with God, how we are to approach God, it's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. You've worked with players and staff navigating some serious struggles. Failure, injury, loss of identity beyond football, loss of family members, things of that nature. What patterns do you see in how those people rebuild after those significant setbacks, and how does their faith shape that recovery?
Yeah, so I mean, we've, like you said, man, we've been a part of some high highs and really low lows, and I think that's just ministry, that's just life, right?
Hmm.
And to be available to those people as they are in the lowest of the lows, and oftentimes, like, I'm not going to have the right words, but my presence is going to be enough in those moments. I'll never forget when, we had a player who tragically passed away, and we were called in, and um, Erica just simply climbed onto the couch with this grieving. I mean, it was so raw. This spouse, and she was dealing. I mean, I can't even imagine losing my spouse tragically quickly like that. And just climbing up into the couch and holding her, letting her cry. Things like this, man, that we have been called into, all the way to doing like incredible wedding ceremonies and baptisms. So, it's the wide spectrum of just pastoral chaplain ministry being available. And people respond differently to those tragedies. Either we blame God, we say it's your fault, you did this, or people draw close and they begin to ask, like, the purpose of life and the why would God let this happen? Like, in being curious about these types of things. And they all lead to just great conversations. And I think the spectrum that you shared there, the high highs of just being available to be in people's moments where they invite you into that, and then, devastating moments where you are rushed into a circumstance that you don't have a category for, and you ask God to please give me the words to say. I don't even know how to operate in this situation. I rely a
Hmm.
little bit on my training, but God is there with us in those moments. And people who lean on their faith, Josh, what I've seen is that when they lean on their faith, that God delivers them through it.
Right.
And when a person might not have a faith to lean onto, that they have to lean on themselves. And oftentimes, man, there's a self implosion, there's a self medicating, there's a self harming, because you reach the end of yourself and that issue's not fixed still. And so people, um, you have to then get to the end of self
Right.
before you can really hit rock bottom. And unfortunately, we've been there when people have hit rock bottom as a result of not having a faith, not having, something bigger to give them hope.
Hmm.
God, that would invade their circumstance and show them that I'll never leave you, I'll never forget about you. And when people don't have that faith, man, it feels like I'm all alone. I have no hope. And so, man, we've been there through the thick and thin with people, and we count it a privilege to be able to serve in this way.
I love that. I love that. Last question for you.
Yep.
Looking at them, and this one is really important to me, because even though I'm young to some people, I'm old to some people. I'm 35 now.
Let's go.
It's
First of all,
I'm
that just made me feel really old, by the way. Holy goodness.
right, but like, I'm starting to come to the realization that, I'm pushing 40 now, and that's not considered young anymore. And so I'm like, plus the fact that I keep sounding more and more like my father, which um is scary in its own right, but is awesome in its own right too. Um, Looking at the next generation of Christian leaders, not only entering into ministry, but into the business world, um, what gives you the most hope about them? And what do you think they need most to lead with faith and integrity? Because we talked earlier in the podcast how 77% of business leaders, need more substance when it comes to incorporating faith into business. So, what do you think they need, and what gives you hope about them?
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about my daughters, basically that age, and so Maddie, 24, Kalea, 22, Ainsley, 18. She just graduated from high school, and I am so hopeful because of their passion. Man, they've got great ideas. There's a sense of which they've seen that a lot of things can't satisfy, chasing a whole bunch of, name those things. And I don't know in my daughter's case if that's a part of our story that they saw like, man, Jesus is everything to us and how he has radically changed the trajectory of our lives and our ministry. And so in the generation that I'm working with, man, there's a lot of great young men and young women who are passionate about pursuing the Lord. And so I see that. I get to work with them. I know that in these places of business, there are these hidden gems of Gen Z that are making some incredible headway in business and in leadership and, in the arts and entertainment space and, health and medicine, like all these different vocations. You've got a whole bunch of young leaders who have a bunch of passion. But what I also love that I'm seeing is that I'm a part of something going to be heading there this summer called the Leadership Games.
Awesome.
Dave Buring,
Yeah.
the Leadership Games is a part of Lion Share Leadership Group, and where Dave intentionally has partnered, 40, 50, 60 year olds with 20s and 30s to be able to invest in them within their vocation, to be able to have mentors, to have guides who will walk alongside of them. And if I were to give like advice to, the 20s and 30s, it would be please seek out godly mentors. You have enough social media content. There's so much content that's out there that can give you a how to do leadership. But what I think that we're missing is the wisdom of the generations who have gone before, who can speak into the heart of leadership. So
Right.
I think that if I were to sit down with, different leaders, I'd say, hey, we need to start talking about the heart behind leadership. There's a whole bunch of how-tos. You can do this, you can do this to grow a business, do all these things. Here's the strategic plans, all of that. But we got to focus on the heart of the leader. And what I love about this up and coming generation, man, is that their hearts are on fire. They
Right.
want to pursue the things that are pure because they're seeing a lot of corrupt leadership, and
Right.
and they want to be different, but sometimes they just don't know how to be different, and they need a guide, a mentor to be able to say, hey, come and follow me. But both parties need to risk it a little bit to say, hey, can I grab a cup of coffee with you? That's a risk on the 20 and 30-year-old to say, hey, can I, hear some advice? And then for the 40 to 80-year-old, like to be able to give that time, that's a risk. But we both have to be doing that. Now that I'm going to be 50 in a year. And so I'm going, okay, now there's some 20s that I need to be investing in. And that's what I'm doing in the space of the NFL, investing in that way. So that's what I would encourage, man. I'm super excited about this generation that's coming up because I see my daughters, I see their friends, I see who they want to be, and I think it's going to need some guides to help them get there.
Yeah. I feel like this is why I'm doing these podcasts now, because I don't want to just put out content about here's how to do business well, here's what like faith in business looks like. I want to bring on people with experience in leadership, and struggling with leadership and
Yeah.
strategic planning and figuring out together, like what that looks like. You
Yeah,
know, it's conversations are a lot more impactful than just me sitting there. Plus,
that's right.
you know, all my all my free resource modules will be on YouTube and Rumble. You know, go check out the Leadership Clarity Field Guide if you want. But um, all of the, I get tired of hearing myself. You know, it's even the modules were like 15 and 20 minutes, and I'm like, man, I have to break it up with more videos or more like video clips because like I'm tired of looking at my face or hearing my
Yeah,
voice.
yeah,
But whenever you bring people on and have a conversation, that's where the
yeah,
real growth
yeah.
happens. That's
Agreed.
where the discipleship happens.
That's right.
And I'm really happy and really blessed that you decided to come on with us today.
Yeah,
Um,
brother, dude, this is a privilege to be on with you, and man, just love you and your family, and it's been a real privilege to watch what God's been doing in your life, man. And I'm just cheering you on. So thanks for having me on your podcast.
Well, thank you. Let me do you a favor. For our viewers who would like to know more about you and what you do, or more about your book, where can they find you at?
Yeah, so I'm all over social media, Instagram. I don't, I'm too old for TikTok. I don't understand it anyway. But
Neither do I.
yeah, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the old people stuff, right? But then we have a website, teamchevalier.com. My speaking website is kentchevalier.com. And, links to the book are all over those pages so they can find them there. So appreciate that.
Awesome, absolutely. We'll also post all of them in the description for everyone. So if you have any questions about where to find him, please just look in the description and they will be there as well as links to the resources that we provide leaders and everything. So thank you, Kent. Could you do me a favor
Sure.
and close us out with a prayer?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, thank you for Josh. Thank you for kingdom planning. Thank you for the start of this journey. And God, I pray that anybody who's listening to this, that you would speak those points of Holy Spirit revelation that they're supposed to pay attention to. There's probably one or two things that were highlighted that really hit them. And so, God, I pray that you would give them the courage to actually do something about those. It's not enough to just hear it and have an aha moment. Holy Spirit, you want us to do something with that. So give people courage to actually take a step and to do something that they're supposed to obey from what it is that they heard today and what you revealed to them. And that's, God, where we see you transform our lives. So, God, we're after transformation. So, God, I thank you for this podcast. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Don't forget to step back for a moment so that you can see clearly where the Lord is leading you, so that you can ask Him to lead you more courageously and help you lead more courageously so that we can all steward faithfully under Christ's authority. We'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, Josh with Kingdom Planning with you again. Thank you so much for watching the previous recording. I just want to let you know that we are here for any of your leadership needs. Right now, we are doing market analysis, risk management, and risk analysis, but we help people discover things that they may not see in a faith-driven culture. So please make sure you check out our free resources below. We have the Leadership Clarity Field Guide, but we also have a free market analysis snapshot for your local market available upon request. We also have a Leadership Clarity Scorecard where you can see if there's anything that you might need to work on in your leadership context to operate efficiently. And that is also free. It's real-time scorecard. And you also have a hidden strain scorecard as well to see if there might be any hidden strain lurking beneath the surfaces there in your organization. So please make sure you check those free resources out, as well as all of our other resources at kingdomplanning.org. But all the links to the free resources are in the description, as well as to our book, 5 hidden strains of leadership. So please make sure you check those out. If you have any concerns or questions for us, please reach out to me at upthegraphj@kingdomplanning.org, and I will get back to you as soon as I get your message. Or you can reach out to us at kingdomplanning.org/contact, and we will get back to you as soon as we receive your message. We really appreciate all of your support. Stay blessed and have a wonderful rest of your day.